Welcome to the Fade to White podcast. I'm your host, Jill Sim, and I will explore corners of American history, both known and unknown, as I uncover the secret history of my family who went from black to white and from enslavement to freedom as eyewitnesses to American history spanning over 200 years. In Season 1, we begin in the modern age, the discovery following my grandmother Ellen's death of my family's African-American history. The discovery of being the great-granddaughter of Anita Hemmings, considered the first black graduate of elite women's college, Vassar, and the discovery that my family passed for white throughout the 20th century. Please join me on this personal journey of discovery into American class, race, and gender history. And thank you for listening. In genealogy, you start with yourself and work your way backwards. The most solid piece of information I had working backwards was that my grandmother Ellen and her mother Anita attended Vassar College. I hopped on the internet evening of March 3rd, 1997, and looked for Vassar's homepage. Once I found it, I checked for alumni associations and got the address for the editor of the Vassar Quarterly, Miss Georgette Weir. Miss Weir might know how I could track down records of a former Vassar graduate. I tapped out a few lines of email inquiry and was surprised by the quickness of the reply. I received the following note on the following day. Quote, I have been able to find some information from the alumni records that I hope will be helpful to you in your research. According to biographical register forms she filled out for the Alumni Association, your great-grandmother's full name was Anita Florence Hemmings, and she was born in Boston to Dora Logan and Robert Williamson Hemmings. She listed their nationalities as American, and she identified English and French as other nationalities in her ancestry. Prior to her marriage, Anita worked for the Boston Public Library as a cataloger in their foreign, incunabula, and the Brown music collections. She listed her religious affiliation as Protestant Episcopal. She prepared for college at Girls High School in Boston and Northfield Seminary. Vassar does claim Anita Hemmings as the first African-American graduate of the college, though apparently for most of her college career, she passed as white. Close quote. I read the email over and over again. I was stunned. My husband was stunned. Grandma's mother was the first black graduate of Vassar College, and she left her black family behind to become white. A decision that would affect all future generations of her family. But the family was black more recently than I assumed. I realized my grandmother had remembered her black grandparents. She was born to their house. Her earliest memory involved them. She grew up knowing about them, but she kept it a secret. Secret from me, the one she told all her stories to. My great-grandmother was the first black graduate of Vassar, an event to celebrate, take pride in. Instead, I might never have learned about her achievement had I not reached out to Vassar. I had no idea what Anita Hemmings looked like. Grandma did not have family portraits displayed in her hotel room. But I remembered the packet of photos and documents I secured from underneath Grandma's bed, and I wondered if there were pictures of Anita in them. I had stored the packet away without looking at its contents. Her things made me sad. I placed all of her things in a sealed box to be opened when I was up to it. Now that box was in an off-site storage unit, and I would not have access to the packet, which ultimately did contain images of Anita, among many others, until we moved to a permanent residence in 1998 when we left Cape Cod for Virginia. But for now, I had family names I didn't have before. Anita's father was Robert Williamson Hemmings, and her mother was named Dora Logan. Robert was the man Grandma's friend Jean had found listed on the 1880 census for Boston in the weeks before Grandma's death. It was Robert and Dora's house my grandma was born to. I began to write down things Grandma told me. She said she didn't come from a big family. There were no Christmases with grandparents. She never spent time with uncles or aunts, or with cousins. But she held on to that memory of waving goodbye on a train platform to the only family she knew. I pictured Ellen, little girl waving, as the train pulled out of the Boston station, bound for New York City. I thought of the permanent dividing line the departure would create going forward, severing ties, waving goodbye into the future. Founded in 1845 by descendants of the Mayflower, the New England Historical Genealogical Society is the oldest of its kind in the country. I requested a couple of research hours from them because I wanted to know exactly where I was going to look for documents on the African American Hemmings family in Boston when I went to Boston. I wanted to learn from experts before researching on my own and not waste time and money. I lucked out in the genealogist assigned to my case, Neil Bowman Todd. He was a Harvard-trained biologist who, well before consumer DNA testing was commonplace, recognized the potential power of genetics testing as a companion to traditional genealogical research methods in making discoveries. Neil dispatched census figures, wills, and death records with lightning speed, the data coming at me too fast to fully absorb. But these documents, plus incoming records from Vassar's archives, gave the first portraits of Anita's birth family. According to his death record, my great-great-grandfather Robert Williamson Hemmings was born in 1843, though other records, such as census data, indicated he was born in 1841. It's possible he didn't know what year he was born, and he and the family gave an estimate. He died on January 14, 1908, and apparently on his 65th birthday. His age was marked 65 years, 0 months, 0 days. If he was born enslaved, I considered that it was likely he didn't know his birthday, so the death date was chosen. Robert's occupation was listed as janitor. The document revealed that Robert had died of exhaustion. He died at home at 278 Harvard Street in Cambridge, half a mile from Harvard University. I presume that this was the house that my grandmother Ellen was born to. And the circa 1873 three-story building still stands at the corner of Harvard and Inman Streets, a multi-family residence at the time the Hemmingses lived there. Boasting about 4,000 square feet of living space, the building is more recently subdivided into residential studio units geared towards students. The siding is cheap gray clapboard from a modern renovation. There's an old red brick two-car garage at the building's rear, and the foundation of the building is partially constructed of brick, as well as the entrance portico, where the brick is painted white, which makes me wonder if the clapboard covers an original red brick facade. Photos of rental listings show the original switchback staircase in the interior, black and white checkerboard tile floors in bathrooms, and solid hardwood floors in bed and living rooms. One of the residents in the building in the Hemmings day was Mrs. Mattie Allen McAdoo, a professional singer and world traveler, and a lifelong race woman. Mrs. McAdoo was an exceptional African American in her day. She was included in the 1907 edition of Clark's Boston Blue Book, quote, the elite private address, carriage, and club directory, ladies visiting list, and shopping guide, close quote, published expressly for Bostonian wasps, or as they were called back then, Boston Brahmins. Miss McAdoo was of a genteel kind, and the building and its other occupants, like the Hemmingses, would have been considered as such too, although I'm not aware the Hemmingses ever made it into the pages of Clark's Boston Blue Book. The transcriber recorded Robert Hemmings's birthplace as Harrisburg, while other records showed Harrisonburg, a town in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia. Robert's mother's name on the death record was reported only as Sarah, unknown. No last name. Robert's father was unfortunately listed as unknown. From the death record for Anita's mother, Dora Logan, she was born in 1852 in small-town Bridgewater, Virginia. Identified on a map, Bridgewater is about 8 miles southwest of Robert's Harrisonburg. Both of Dora's parents were listed as unknown, unfortunately. I stared at the repeated word, unknown, knowing I might never find any of the unknowns in the family. And I was confused by something else. This information that a woman named Dora Logan was Anita's mother contradicted what Grandma told me a long time ago after I asked questions about the family line. The mother's name, I was told, was Louise. No last name, no maiden name. Grandma said her mother's mother was a French Creole woman, vain and beautiful, and she was born in Louisiana. I was given the Creole-sounding name Marguerite, and I assumed that that was the name of Louise's mother, or Anita's grandmother. But as the information for Robert and Dora was supplied by their son Frederick Hemmings, a mysterious brother of Anita's, who lived with and knew his parents best, he would be the authority over my grandmother's second-hand information about grandparents she never got to know. But maybe the problem was my memory of what she told me, because she was tight-lipped and tense in response to any questions involving our bloodlines. I assumed both Robert and Dora started out life enslaved, unable as I was at first to find either one of them listed as free before census year 1870. 1870 marked the first year African Americans emancipated before, during, and after the Civil War were listed on the federal census with full names and as heads of households with families, with ages, occupations, property data, and with places of birth. Neil Todd was unable to locate Robert anywhere on the 1870 census, but he did find a Dora Logan, listed as Black and 18 years old and working as a domestic at the American Hotel in Robert's listed birthplace, Harrisonburg. I reckon they would have met there, in town, during Reconstruction, in the years following the Civil War. The Shenandoah Valley where they likely met had been laid to waste in the war. Union troops made a return invasion into the Shenandoah Valley, summer 1864, 3 years into the war, and the battle-scarred and hardened armies under the command of General Philip Sheridan came with total war on their minds. Union General and future President Ulysses S. Grant gave Sheridan this terse instruction: go in. This invasion became known as the Burning, taking place during harvest time in one of the richest agricultural regions in the entire nation. The burning was a lesser-known event than General Sherman's famous burning of Atlanta, but the mandate was the same: destroy. The Yankees torched crops and the sturdy German-built barns of the valley, and the newly built railroads, bridges, and farm equipment and tools. They killed any animals they couldn't confiscate. General Grant communicated to Sheridan, quote, carry off stock of all descriptions and Negroes so as to prevent further planting. If the war is to last another year, we want the Shenandoah Valley to remain a barren waste, close quote. The Federals seized the grain, the lumber, the family silver, and the horses to replace weary or dead mounts. They gathered up enslaved laborers who were stuck in place. They hired them and trained them as soldiers, or sent them beyond the borderland to freedom. Sheridan and his forces, some 28,000 men, camped around Robert's birthplace of Harrisonburg in September 1864, doubling the area's population. After losing one of his men, incorrectly believed to be murdered by civilians, Sheridan ordered the town of Dayton near Harrisonburg destroyed, although much of it was ultimately spared, including the ancestral stone fort home of the Harrison family, founders of Harrisonburg. We'll get to them later. But the beautiful and bountiful Valley of Virginia lay in smoldering ruins and prevented starving Confederate troops from achieving victory on other battlegrounds in the weeks to follow. Local families who became impoverished overnight left in droves. using some 400 wagons in flight. Others stayed behind and worked tirelessly to reclaim the Valley of Virginia in the ensuing years. We'll revisit the war again, but presumably it was during the rebuilding time when my great-great-grandparents met. Dora Logan was working in the center of Harrisonburg town, reconstructing from the ashes of war. The American Hotel was a former stone tavern in the center of town, on the Court Square, part of acreage given in 1779 for the public good by local landowner Thomas Harrison, for whose sake the town's former name Rocktown was changed. The hotel attracted a stream of guests in war's aftermath. Its proprietor was a Captain John Milton Locke, Confederate cavalry officer, who had been wounded at the Battle of Gettysburg in south-central Pennsylvania, July 1863. We will also return to Gettysburg. There were other black staff at the American, listed with Dora Logan on the 1870 census. Two men, I would learn through further digging, were brothers, Peter and John Allen, 24 and 21 respectively. There was a woman named Ellen Sims, 22, and according to outside research, she was the older sister of Lucy Sims, a leading and much beloved educator for over a half-century in Harrisonburg's postbellum schools. There was an older woman, Lucy Miller, 60, who was the grandmother of Lucy and Ellen Sims. The Miller Sims were members of a multi-generational family enslaved to a local family named Gray. Before the war, the Millers and Sims lived and worked either at the Gray Plantation Hilltop, which is today the site of Ralph Sampson Park, named for a Basketball Hall of Famer, or they worked at former Gray Plantation Colacello, established by Gray family patriarch Robert Gray, an Irish immigrant turned local attorney. I wondered if the Miller Sims or Allens were our relatives, and that Dora had been enslaved to the Grays along with them. Years later, I would learn the answer was no, as we'll see. The black domestics at the American Hotel worked under their white matron, Mary Lupton, who would eventually purchase Gray House Colacello and run it as a boarding house. The American at the time offered free coachman-driven omnibus service, and it advertised itself as a, quote, first-class house. Staff were charged with housekeeping, laundry, sewing, cooking, errands, guest services, requiring that seen not heard yet warm and gracious approach, reminiscent of domestic service given in the antebellum plantation household. Training in slavery saw freed staff continuing to apply their skills for self-support. And Dora, I was soon to learn, prepared for running her own boarding houses in the Yankee North from her training under Mary Lupton. The American commanded high rates during the war. Board was $150 a month, or $10 a day, and meals were $4, and, quote, positively no credit. One of the Americans' residents in 1870 was a woman named Martha Plecker. Martha lived at the American with her two young children. Her husband Adam fought in the war, as did Adam's brother Jacob Plecker. The Pleckers were German immigrant stock, which had settled the Shenandoah Valley in many numbers. Martha Plecker's nephew Walter, 9 years old in 1870, was living with his family a dozen miles south of Harrisonburg in Mount Sidney, model of the serene and hilly farming hamlet for the yeoman farmer in the Valley of Virginia. As an adult, Walter Plecker would gain notoriety as Dr. Walter Plecker, one of the most rabid white supremacists in all American history, who through his work at Virginia's Bureau of Vital Statistics radically altered both Black and Native American lives well before the 20th century. In census year 1870, Walter Plecker and his family were served by a 23-year-old live-in black domestic servant named Delia Strother. I would learn in time that Strother was one of our family names. The revulsion of seeing so many free mulattoes, so very common in Virginia, led young Walter to become increasingly obsessive about preventing miscegenation or racial mixing in his Virginia. Mulattoes were the evidence of race mixing, disgusting to many white people, though they were also the main drivers of it. Plecker was fanatical in his belief that too many light-skinned people were passing as white, hiding in plain sight, as reflected in a decline in numbers of mulattoes enumerated after the turn of the century. He was especially paranoid that, quote, Negroids were hiding by claiming to be Indian. Walter Plecker did not believe that there were any indigenous Virginians left in the 20th century, and that people who self-identified as Native Virginian were obviously of African descent. Plecker listed the surnames of those he proposed were passing for white in each county. His work as the first registrar of Virginia's Bureau of Vital Statistics, overseeing death, marriage, birth records, empowered him with a stroke of a pen to impose racial identities on the birth record of every child, and to make official changes to racial designations. One was either white or colored, which led to the state's Racial Integrity Act of 1924 to uphold the state's segregation practices and to prevent any interracial marriages or mixed families. Under Plecker, all of Virginia's non-white populations were classed as colored. Well into the 2000s, indigenous groups have fought to prove their cultural identities and achieve state and federally recognized tribal status. In a surreal loophole, descendants of the first families of Virginia, or FFVs, the white elite class, were accommodated with Walter Plecker's special Pocahontas Clause, which excluded descendants of Pocahontas, Virginia's best-known Indian princess, or those with 1/16 or less of Indian blood, as long as there was no evidence of other colored blood at play. Descendants of Pocahontas were thus classified as white, and we can imagine the rush to adopt an Indian princess among white families who couldn't fill in the family tree. I grew up a white girl and a daughter of Virginia. I knew that from Grandma, with our own family rumors of Indian princesses, courtesy Ellen, to include Pocahontas. I now understand that this was code for being a WAN, W-A-N, as I think of it, or white American native. Walter Plecker was the driver behind dropping the mulatto designation, someone with at least a quarter so-called black blood, so that even the lightest skinned were assigned to black, Negro, or colored classifications, and relegated to the lower class status of Black Americans. The one-drop rule saw its apogee during the 1920s and 1930s, the time when my grandmother was fielding some gossip at Vassar about her background, as we'll see, while also plotting a stage career, which could have exposed her as having 1 or 2 drops of so-called black blood. Plecker's work was inextricably linked with increasing political powers and membership numbers in the white supremacist group, the Ku Klux Klan, an organization founded as an enraged white response to post-war Reconstruction with civil rights gains for black people. American racists were emboldened by our nation's broadening imperial reach into developing worlds, grounded in a foreign policy of a global white supremacy shared by Western Europe. Plecker's handiwork dovetailed with growing interest in the eugenics movement, which called for race-based improvements of humanity by selecting for more desirable human traits through advantageous marriage and selective breeding, and for the sterilization of those considered feeble-minded or undesirable. It was believed eugenics could solve the problem of poverty cycles, especially among poor black families. Light-skinned people across Virginia were scrutinized for the barest hint of African ancestry. In a state that long instituted black codes and laws against interracial sexual relations and intermarriage, many were forced to leave the only home they knew, crossing state lines, punished for acting on love and wanting a family. When you look at the federal census for Rockingham County for 1870, you will see the families and individuals of color being closely tracked, as indicated by a black marker line next to their names. This black mark accompanied Dora Logan's name, and all of her co-workers too. Walter Plecker was keeping track of the black people on his home turf. Walter Plecker was a proud son of the Shenandoah Valley, member of respectable white family the mulatto domestic Dora Logan served at the American Hotel following the war to end slavery. As the South was reasserting herself during Reconstruction, segregated colored schools were introduced to the Shenandoah Valley with segregated churches and businesses. The earliest among the schools for the freed people was run by the Freedmen's Bureau and located at Bridgewater, Dora's stated birthplace on her death record. After the war, Union generals working with the American Missionary Association, or AMA, sent down Northern educators to teach in the schools. Locals didn't take kindly to the presence of the Yankee educators. Neither did they support educational institutions directed by their foe, believing their people should be educated by former masters and local families, should they desire to have it done. The school at Bridgewater opened in 1868, but was almost immediately vandalized. In Harrisonburg, the segregated and formerly pro-slavery Methodist Episcopal Church South rallied to educate the white children of deceased soldiers, including war orphans, but left it to others to service any educational needs of local black children. In slavery time, there had been a certain circumstantial intimacy between black and white people occupying shared space on farms and estates. In freedom, the formation of communities separated by color class led to the alienation between former white employers and their families and former black laborers and their families. As has been argued, slavery gave black people certain measures of protection, but relative to their values. That protection, as such, ended with war's disruption and mass migration of black families north and Reconstruction, which led to a reordering of Southern communities centered around color divides. Into the 1870s and 1880s, black people experienced ongoing economic disparities and economic insecurity. They were the eyewitnesses and targets of an unbowed South, which used intimidation and deterrent strategies to prevent the emancipated from pursuing more than a rudimentary education, from voting, requiring literacy tests and poll taxes, from holding office, owning property, generally, and from establishing, owning, or running successful businesses. Many towns in the Shenandoah Valley adopted sundown codes, as elsewhere throughout the Southland, which closely monitored and limited black movement, imposing curfews and designating no-go areas. Such racialized spaces cemented gross socioeconomic disparities. Black lives were always monitored by white Southerners, but in freedom, any ambitious individuals, like the men bravely running for political office, or women and men agitating for education and for the franchise, and communities striving for economic growth, became the instant targets of white paranoia, resentment, and jealousy. And many were subjected to appalling violence in the post-war scramble for available resources. John Whalen, in History of Rockingham County, recounts that the Reconstruction-era Harrisonburg that Dora and Robert knew was experiencing much disorder and violence. Quote, "There was robbing of stores, mills, smokehouses, and persons. Street lamps of Harrisonburg were smashed, and a large number of shade trees around the public square were belted, the bark being cut off in a circle around the trunks. Cattle were killed in the fields, the meat carried off. Hogs in their owners' fields were either butchered or driven away. Much of this freebooting was done by Negroes, lately slaves, and by poor whites hard-pressed by evil ties. But it is also known that some of it was by young white men of respectable families whose foraging propensities still lacked restraint." Close quote. John Whalen attributed this criminal behavior to the war, rendering the South as a destroyed land and a vast graveyard, which created a generalized hopelessness about the future. The celebrated father of American sociology, W.E.B. Du Bois, was born after the war and in the North, but he attended Fisk University in Tennessee and taught school in the South. He gathered recollections from people he met along the way, describing an atmosphere that was given by forces at play my ancestors would have known very well. Quote, "Curiously incongruous elements were left arrayed against each other, the North, the government, the carpetbagger, and the slave here, and there all the South that was white, whether gentleman or vagabond, honest man or rascal, lawless murder or martyr to duty. So the cleft between the white and black South grew." Close quote. If Dora Logan wished to pursue an education or start a business in a place rife with conflict, subject to racist policies and convulsions, she would have to contend with too many obstacles in the way. In October 1870, the Shenandoah River, quote, "rose to an unprecedented height," close quote, and flooded homes and farms and area towns to include Bridgewater. 2 months later, at Christmas, homes and businesses along Harrisonburg's Court Square, being connected and made of wood, were destroyed by a fire. Dry goods and a liquor store, the Oddfellows Hall, a grocery store, and a bank went up in flames. The American Hotel's facade was heavily damaged, as were some of the interior spaces. From Virginia's Office of Vital Records, I obtained a marriage record for Robert Hemmings and Dora Logan, showing that they married on October 24, 1871, in Rockingham County, where Harrisonburg is located. There was no other information except both were listed as colored. With sharp memories of slavery and war, and a guaranteed future of permanent poverty and hardship until death, with no protections from the embittered white leadership if they remained, Robert and Dora quit Harrisonburg and Virginia for a better life, decamping for Boston, Massachusetts, after being wed.